Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Dan Tocchini, who is a distinguished entrepreneur and executive with a career spanning over 4 decades in transformational leadership and organizational development. He's the founder and senior partner at TNG and has pioneered innovative approaches to team dynamics and leadership training, emphasizing authentic engagement and candid feedback. He's also a co-founder, executive, and board director for The Grid, a pioneering developer of AI technology to design, construct, and maintain dynamic websites. His expertise extends to his role as well as co-founder and chairman of Culture ROI, where he specializes in sales and negotiation training, productivity enhancement, and fostering transformational change in corporate cultures. I could go on, but I want to get to introducing Dan directly. Before we dive into talking about leadership and teams, can you just share something about yourself personally so our audience can get to know you as a whole person?
Well, I'm a grandfather of 6 with a seventh one coming. I have 2 kids. I live up in Idaho and travel around the country, but I do a lot of fly fishing. I'm an outdoorsman and spend a lot of time on the river. I live on, my family lives on about 500 acres. There's 6 or 7 families up here, and we like the outdoors, and I love it. I love living up here.
Oh, amazing. We have a little bit in common. I have family out in Idaho and several times have taken an annual trip that they take into the mountains. I think it's technically on the Salmon River to go fly fishing.
That's one of my favorite places. Yeah.
Yeah, way out there, so far out there that we take a teeny plane onto the teeniest, you can't even call it an airstrip. It's like a field with a cliff in front. Yeah. And you stop before you hit the cliff. Anyway, well, that's wonderful. So let's talk about leadership. Let's talk a little bit about what brought you to leadership and what do you see as successful leadership, team management? What are the key elements for you?
Well, I think leadership was just a natural thing. If somebody wasn't heading up or leading something, I often found myself just saying, well, I'm in, let's go. Let's organize this, let's get focused, that kind of thing. But I would say the key elements, at least for me, have been, you first have to master yourself to lead others well. I mean, you can lead others. I was a cavalier young man, and I naturally lead others. I think my certainty, which often was cavalier, people would trust it. And I found that if I didn't, because I was cavalier, I often shot from the hip. And I think I betrayed, my team often without thinking about it, just because I wanted to go in a different direction or, to change. So mastering oneself, which includes managing your impact on other people, is a vital, if you're going to be a consistent leader and people are going to want to follow you and bring people along, then managing yourself and mastering yourself and managing your impact are going to be vital, and that'll produce extraordinary results. That's at least that's what I've found.
Yeah, I love that. I hear in that kind of like the difference. So many times visionaries start things, and the difference between a visionary
And leader.
Some visionaries, they're just a lone person running out there, and maybe they think other people are following them, but they're not, because they can't keep up and they have no idea what's going on. And then there are those visionaries who become or started out leaders who aren't just running out there alone, but they're able to bring along a group of maybe non-visionaries to really build something new in the future.
Yeah, I've found that there are pioneers and there are settlers, and there's a need for both. If you need pioneers to carve new ground and to take new ground, which is our company, and then you need settlers to organize and set in the foundation so you can build on it. And so both are vital, and knowing where to put people on the bus, it's a vital skill.
Yeah. So tell me a little more about what kind of folks you work with and what kind of results you help them achieve.
Well, we work with, my company works with, and I work with mostly entrepreneurs, etc. We've worked with a number of well-known founders, many of them at the beginning. In fact, we're in the middle of launching quite a project now called, it's called Flora and Company, and Ginny from Ginny's Splendid Ice Creams has taken it on, and she's now the CEO. But we're basically tackling in that company, and she's an example of a kind of founder we work with. I've done a lot of work with founders of nonprofits, done a lot of work with Homeboy Industries in LA, did a lot of work with Defy Ventures. I worked with a lot of kids coming out of gangs, Straight Ahead Ministries, where I developed curriculum, taught the team how to deliver the curriculum, built it around, for instance, with kids that are coming out of gangs, built a curriculum within the prison, got to know the shot callers. Then we were the first to bring rival gangs together in prison and work with them. And these guys, Straight Ahead Ministry, we had a program where we put entrepreneurs with them, or we help the kids get themselves into a university. So it would either be a trade or they go to a school, and that's been very successful. So, the work I've done has been mostly around people who are carving something new into the world, or they're looking to do something unprecedented. And they usually are haunted or disturbed by a problem that won't leave them alone, and therefore they're constantly thinking about it.
Yeah. Is in your work, comparing the work you've done with startup nonprofits to startup for-profits, are there any differences that you see between those processes and those leaders and what they need to do?
Well, it depends on if they're working with volunteers. A lot of nonprofit organizations are working with volunteers, and that's it's a different throw. Although it ought not be, it is. It's easy to take a volunteer for granted, and it's easy to take an employee for granted. But I think the key is being able to add value to their lives, to understand what adds value to them, because they're there at the nonprofit, they're there volunteering their time, and understanding how the vision and mission connect to their lives, I think is a huge need if you want to really generate a value for value exchange. And people love it. People will come back if they're honored, if they feel like they've been taken care of, if I'm not wasting their time or taking them for granted, they come back. And I ran an organization. I was the executive director for 18 years for an organization that did transformational trainings, work with nonprofits and individuals in the general public. And I did that for 18 years. And that was a big challenge, right? It's getting people, because it's all people. And your ability to deal with people, your ability to add value to them, especially when in conflict, to be able to navigate conflict with them is a huge deal about with regard to getting them to align with what you're doing and contribute in a way that they feel good about it.
I love that. Can we talk a little more about, with your background with candid communication, what are some tips you have for working through conflict? And I'll just say, kind of as a precursor to that, I think from my perspective, business done badly, negative, destructive content happens, and business done well, we have very positive, natural conflict that emerges as we try to achieve things in a coordinated way. And so what's your perspective on conflict, and how do we move through that?
I think first, if I'm going to work through a conflict, and that's a lot of my work, usually in the business side, when I'm called in, it's because things aren't well. They're either trying to implement something new and it hasn't taken off, or they're in the middle of a conflict and business is going the wrong direction. So the first key is, I think, being curious and generating an environment where people want to learn. And that is a challenge, because usually when you have a conflict, you have two people or two sides of an issue, and both sides are certain that their point of view is the way to get it done. They often both agree on what needs to get done, but what the conflict's over is how it's going to get done and why it's going to get done the way they're going to get it done. And the idea is to get all the interests on the table and to invite them to be curious about what's going on for the other parties that are the opposite side of them. And the work is to get them, I work to get them shoulder to shoulder to solve the same problem and listen to each other. Now, a lot of leaders don't like conflict, which is kind of oxymoronic for me. I mean, if you're going to be a leader, then you better get ready for conflict. And you better know that that's part of it. In fact, that's where you're going to make the biggest difference. Why have a leader? If you've got to be willing to go where nobody wants to go, but you need to go. And I have a saying. I say to the people I work with, usually, what you refuse to face will eventually defeat you. So, and knowing that, keeping that in the foreground is what builds courage. Because, look, people are 5 times more likely to take action on something that's going to cause them, to avoid pain, than they are to do something that will bring them pleasure. So a lot of my work is helping build a parade of horribles with people that, if you don't do this now, what do you think's going to be coming down the road? And build that out. And the more they see that, the more courage they have to take care of the issue now.
Yeah. I think that's really great advice. So just to dig a little deeper, so when you walk into a room, what are your kind of tried and true basket of tools to start with to bring people to a point of curiosity?
Well, the first thing there's 5 basic principles I work from. They're neuroscientific in nature. They're just true for every human being. And the first one is, people always make the best choice they see available. So people don't get up in the morning and go, oh, I'm going to make the second best choice or third best choice today. In fact, if you think about it and you look out and you say, why did that person do that? That's pretty stupid. But to them, that was the best choice available given the context. Now, if you saw a better choice, they may have seen that choice, but it probably showed up like a threat. So first off, I've got to ask myself, what mindset is going on that was the best choice available? So that gives me some empathy to kind of connect with, okay, that makes sense in this context. And then I realized that the next one is, people always act congruently with the way the world occurs for them. Right? So that was the best choice they saw available because of the way the world was occurring to them. And there was probably, I see a better choice, or you might see a better choice, but the world's occurring differently for you than it is for them. So now I want to be curious about, how is the world occurring for this person? And so that gets me curious about, and I start to inquire into what's going on for them. And that brings up the third principle, which is the world occurs for people in language, right? So the way I'm talking to myself on an ongoing basis is what causes the world to look a certain way. And that's influenced by what I've made up about my past, what's happened to me, what I made up about it, what I'm making up about the future and what's possible. So I can start to hear and understand how the world is occurring for them, usually through their language. They're going to emphasize what they want me to know. They're going to omit what they don't want me to know or what they don't want to look at. And they're going to talk in certain patterns. They're going to use certain predicates that position them in a certain way towards the problem. So for instance, it's easy to listen to people. It's always a flag for me when somebody's a hero of their story all the time. It's like, right? Like okay, that means that somebody was a villain, and I wonder if this person's in touch with their contribution to the breakdown. I'll never forget, my wife had a daycare when we were younger. We had 12 kids who would come over, and I had 2 children, and we'd have 10 other kids. And they were with us for 8 years. But I'll never forget one time this lady came in, and she was a new mom. She's bringing her child, and I'm in the bathroom getting ready to go to work, and I can hear my wife talking to her, and the woman is really dissing the daycare down the road. And so my wife comes in, she's excited, she's got a new client, and she goes, she's really nice and blah, blah, blah. I go, this is not a good client. She goes, what do you mean? I said, if you take her on, you're probably going to be that daycare down the road, because you didn't ask her about why she would say those things, and did she ever go back and clean them up? And and she probably didn't, which means she's probably going to withhold from you, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm listening to the language and how the world. And my wife, sure enough, 2 months later that occurred, she goes, "How did you know that?" And we were young then. I was working on these principles at that time. And I said, just listen to her language. And so my wife, it was funny because my wife enrolled in one of my coaching classes so that she could pick it up. And we worked together we've worked together now for 35 years. But that's the third principle. The fourth principle is that the future language transforms current state. What you are, who you are now, and this is a neuroscientific principle. They know that this goes on. Your brain decides if it's okay to be the way you are now by the future it thinks is coming. So, if you and I are talking and I think my income's going to go down half this year, but you're going to double your income, if you really believe you're going to double your income and I really believe I'm going to half my income, we're going to be very different in the moment together, right? And now the past, your brain may be drawing from the past to make that decision. And that's a different story. That's the next principle. But knowing that the future that people think is coming is what determines their current state, then a lot of times when I'm in an inquiry, in a breakdown, in a conflict, I'm wondering what they think the future's going to be with this person based on their upset. And if we can I was in Africa, I was doing a mediation between a Toza and a Zulu. And the Toza they speak very directly. They don't use metaphor. And the Zulu did nothing but use metaphor. And these two tribes in this particular area had been pretty violent, had been upset. And I was asked by this council, like a mayoral council, to mediate. And in the middle of the conversation, I realized that the Zulu was speaking in metaphor, and I could tell the Toza was very direct. And the directness of the Toza made the Zulu suspicious, and the indirectness of the Zulu made the Toza suspicious. So I slowed everything down and had them notice that and asked them if they would care enough about the other person to try to say what they had to say in a way that they could hear it. And the Toza was very accommodating. He stood up and he was metaphorical about what he had to say. And the Zulu reacted in the same way. He was direct, saying what and it was in 15, 20 minutes we had things resolved. But they were thinking that the future was this guy was going to betray him because of the way they were talking, language, future. Then when I could have them consider that that's not the future that's coming, unless you continue in this state, you'll probably find a way to distrust each other. Why don't you try this? Right? And it made sense to them. So I asked the Zulu, why are you so suspicious of him? He said, well, he's so blunt, he doesn't care about where I'm at. And I asked the Zulu, or the Xhosa, why are you suspicious? He goes, he beats around the bush. Right? So those were vital insights that helped them invent a different future, which calmed them down now.
Yeah, such a great example. And I think, those 5 points, I hear a lot through them of curiosity, listening, getting people to hear each other, or tell me if you agree. What I found in my work is even more important than actually listening, which is good,
It's a good thing.
is having people feel heard.
Yes.
Because you can listen and still make somebody feel unheard.
That's right.
And you can also make somebody feel heard without even listening, which actually works a surprising amount of the time. Because I found people they're not receptive to being curious until they felt like they have a stake, that they were heard, right? That they had their piece out. There's like a reciprocal nature.
That's a great distinction, though. It's true. It's that they feel heard, and the way people feel heard is that you're so engaged, and you can repeat back what somebody says, and they'll feel condescended too. So you've got to really be connected. They've got to hear that you're with them, or that you're picking it up, and once they do that, the trust level goes way up, and then people will share more information.
Yeah, so true. I had a group at an organization that was really, the organization basically needed to close and everybody go their own separate way, but no one was ready. And everyone was angry, ready to blaming each other who ruined it.
Yeah, right.
And that was the first time I really recognized the power of feeling heard. I was like, okay, well, I was young. I was in my 20s. I was like, well, one thing I know about helping people resolve things is if we all sit down and eat together.
Right. And
that's an effective strategy across many cultures. So I invited everybody over to my house, and I like to cook, and I made a big lunch for everybody. And I was winging it at the time. So this is, but taking what I knew about conflict resolution. I had been trained in that. So that was helpful. And then I had everybody go around and share right out of the bucket, because I knew this group knew each other well and they loved each other. They'd known each other for a long time. Share what the person just to the left of them or the right of them was worried about. And it ended up being a great exercise, because actual people who thought nobody knew what they were feeling realized that without any prompting, their random neighbor at the table knew exactly what they were worried about. Yeah. And once everybody said, and then they got a chance to say what they were actually worried about. And once everybody felt heard, that was it. The whole conflict was resolved. Everyone, conversation over. They're like, I guess we're all ready and we all love each other. And that was the whole process.
Even if you said, if you were sitting next to me and you said something I wasn't worried about, I would be interested in, how did I portray that? I'm not worried. I would want to know more. I would feel like you cared enough to listen, but I'd want to know what, because I'm really not worried about that, but what gave you the idea that I was? I'd be I'd be hooked into the conversation for sure. Right on. It's really good. I'm gonna use that. I really like it.
You take that. Go for it. And I want to highlight, too, what you said about context. And actually, while you were talking about the context, I was in my own Africa experience where I lived with a family in Tanzania in East Africa.
Oh, wow.
And I was surprised that every time we went somewhere in the car, the first stop was to put enough gas in the car just for that trip. And I approached it with curiosity. I'm like, why wouldn't you just fill up your tank? Because it's annoying. The gas station's far away. And then I came to realize your car could get stolen at any moment. Your car could break down and it could be impossible to get the part. So in that context, it is a waste of money to fill your tank up with gas because you could be wasting most of that gas. And I was like, oh, so it wasn't like,
Oh,
oh, these people are stupid.
no,
They don't
no.
fill up their tank with
And
gas.
they do think really in the moment. I was in South Africa setting up an antiretroviral drug distribution center in these different little community centers we were opening in squatters camps. And then American doctors would come over and then we'd distribute. And we would only distribute the antiretroviral drugs one dose at a time because they would, if you gave them the full month's dose, they would go out and trade it for food. And then they would get, but yeah, it made a lot of sense. And so what we did is help them grow gardens. We put one American on the ground. The rest were all South Africans. And we did a lot of work with, because they have what they call black, brown, and white. And the brown and the black are more adversarial than the white and the black or the white and the brown. So, to get them together and to talk was really a powerful time. And there was a lot of that kind of curiosity. Even when people weren't curious, you could stop them and say, if it wasn't that way, would you want to know? And they would go, well, yeah, I would. But they'd never thought about that, well, yeah, I would. If it wasn't the way I thought it was, sure, I'd like to know. And I said, well, then let's ask a question, right? And that would keep them engaged in some level of curiosity that would inform them beyond their preconceived ideas. So, but I really liked that exercise you did.
Well, thank you. So let's talk about, bring these concepts home, because we had some really fun examples here. But when it comes to being a leader and thinking about good communication and communication maybe where your team is in conflict, what are some kind of more benign examples or that you can share to inspire leaders to have better conversations or to be more curious with their team?
I do a lot of work, like I said, with founders. And one of the biggest first off, I tell founders, whatever your complaint is, whatever your ongoing complaint is where you stopped. And that's where you think you can't go any further. So rather than ask for what you want, you complain. And so the first thing I ask people to do is ask themselves, if you're complaining, if you have a chronic complaint, write it down. Because that's where the possibility is. But it's a bit of a self-confrontation. You have to go, what am I getting out of complaining rather than asking for or going after what I want? What is it I don't think is possible? And so I'm settling for less than what I think is possible, thus my complaint. And I think that somehow complaining is going to get me something I don't have. And it's getting you something. It is
right. And when you say it like that, it's like really obvious, right? Like obviously complaining to myself isn't getting me anything.
Well, it's getting
positive.
You something. It's usually getting you get to be right. You get to look good. There's something, look good, feel good, be right, be in control. Those are the 4 survival concerns that drive us, especially in the social kind of environments we live in. So that's a big deal. This is getting a hold of that. And then realizing, a complaint is a frustrated request. That's usually what it is. I'm afraid to hear no. I don't know who to ask or whatever but if I just start asking, if I start articulating what I really want, and that takes a little bit of work. And that's a big deal.
I want to highlight that because I feel like I've been in part of this process with a lot of leaders, and I've been like, well, did you like their complaint? Did you ask that person for this thing? You're like, oh yeah, I did. I'm like, how did you ask them? Let's see that email, right? And then it's in the email. It's not clear at all.
Or they're telling people what should be happening, or they're, I do an extra, so I do a lot of work in a room, classroom, and I can you don't have to bring anything into the room. People bring their conflicts with them. So I just set up a simple little game. I've got a number of little games I play. But one of the things I do is I'll video the game. And one game I play depends on the power of your requests. And people will say they requested, but they didn't. they stated what they wanted, but they didn't ask for anybody to accept that. Will you do this? Will this happen by then? But in their mind, to your point, they felt like they asked. And I'm married now. I'm with my wife 50 years. And I've made that. My wife actually has brought out multiple times a tape recorder to the conversation. If we have the conversation 2 or 3 times, I know the tape recorder is coming out. Because I think there it is on the table. She wants to talk. So.
I love that. Well, we are at time. I'm going to ask you for a final word of advice and what kind of folks should reach out to you? Who's a great fit to work with you? And what's the best way for them to do that?
If you're committed to something bigger than you and you're disturbed by a condition, a problem out in the world, or you see something that's needed and you want to tackle it, but you're afraid or you're nervous, or you don't know if you want to take the risk, or whatever it is, or you're in it and you're stuck, or you're in it and you've really got a project and you don't quite know what exactly it's going to take to get it done, that kind of thing, I'm the guy to call. We specialize in it. We have a lot of experience on our team. I've run multi-million-dollar companies and nonprofits. My partner took a company from $30 million market cap to $60 billion in 5 years market cap. So $6 billion market cap. And we have a lot of background that we can bring to a problem. But the first thing we're going to do, just so you know and they know, is we're going to work with the context you are. Because that is what is keeping you from seeing what's possible. And we have a very scientific, practical way of doing it. And some of it I spoke about here. So if that interests you, we can, we're the people you want to talk to. Take New Ground is the name of the company.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure. And thank you out there for listening and everything that you do to make our communities better. Before you go, I have a quick favor for you listening out there. Please take a moment to like and review this podcast and share it on with a friend or colleague who could benefit from these conversations. And for those of you struggling with the game of what I call nonprofit leadership whack-a-mole, just remember that the secret is working smarter, not harder, not burning yourself out. And in that vein, until next time, take good care of yourself.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.